For a long time, I always believed that the lowest point in animation history was the 80s. In the 80s, there were no cartoons and there were no animated movies. There were just glorified toy commercials, and that's it. I'm talking stuff like TMNT, Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, Thundercats, all made just to sell toys to children. And then it's the same thing with animated movies. You had 3 Care Bear movies. You had My Little Pony the movie. You have Pound Puppies the movie. You have all kinds of stuff like that. I don't even know what the Pound Puppies is, but I'm getting mad at toy commercial vibes just looking at the poster for this thing, so I don't care. It counts. You just had all of these soulless corporate manufactured products disguised as cartoons and animated movies, when in reality they're just made to sell toys to children. There's no artistic value in any of these at all. They're just soulless products, and that's it. I can understand why people say, like, oh, I miss the 90s. The 90s were a better time for cartoons compared to nowadays. Like, sure, that's understandable. I don't understand it for the 80s. I don't know how anyone can think like any of this is better. I don't even care what people say, you know? I'm glad I grew up with Fanboy and Chum Chum and Johnny Test and whatever. I don't even care if people get mad at me for saying that. Because you know what? At least these 2 shows, at least they aren't soulless toy commercials like TMNT and Thundercats. No, clearly the 80s were a much better time for animation, you know? I wish I grew up watching f***ing Care Bears in Wonderland and not The Incredibles or the SpongeBob movie or anything like that. I was born in the wrong generation. Yeah, the 80s were a terrible time for animation, and I thought that was like the nadir of animation. I thought that was when animation was at its lowest point. I'm not so sure about that nowadays. This 1 year alone that we are in, 2023, this might be the lowest point in animation history. This one singular year might be a worse time for animation than the entire decade of the 80s, which is insane to me. Elemental is doing terrible at the box office, thus continuing Disney and Pixar's streak of having their animated movies flop, which started last year with Lightyear and Strange World. Warner Bros. Is dying. Velma exists. The live-action Little Mermaid remake exists. We're getting a live-action remake of Moana that's coming out less than 10 years after the original animated movie because originality is dead. And Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, despite being a masterpiece of a movie, allegedly had very awful working conditions during the production of it. I think it's safe to say that this is the worst year in animation history, and we have entered a new dark age, a new apocalypse for animation, because I genuinely cannot see things getting better for this art form. I'm just going to go ahead and say that only 2 of the aforementioned topics will be primarily covered in this video. Elemental flopping at the box office, and the alleged bad workplace conditions for Across the Spider-Verse's development. I've already made an entire video on the live-action Little Mermaid remake, which you could check out, and I basically said everything that I've wanted to say about the live-action Moana remake in numerous videos, these 2 videos primarily. I also inevitably plan on making a video on Velma, even though it is a dead horse at this point, and that there's no point in hating it right now. This video is just me expressing my frustrations with animation in 2023, and why I believe that these 2 things, Elemental flopping and the really bad workplace conditions for Across the Spider-Verse, that's what made me snap. The Across the Spider-Verse stuff especially really hurts me like you have no idea. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. With that said, let us jump into the less painful of the 2 topics. Elemental flopping at the box office is disappointing, but not surprising in all honesty. I expected this to happen. However, I feel very different about this movie flopping compared to when Lightyear and Strange World flopped at the box office. I don't want to come off as rude and say that these movies deserve to flop or anything like that, but these movies, there's nothing special about either of these movies. They're not awful movies or anything like that. Far from it. They are watchable movies, but I'd be lying if I said that these were really memorable, amazing movies that have tons of rewatch value in them. Elemental is different, as I personally found it to be a pretty good movie. It might not be one of Pixar's strongest movies, but I'd still think it's a welcome addition to their catalog. The main thing I praise about the movie is its beautiful animation. The art direction was something that I've always been drawn to for the movie ever since we first saw footage of it, and admittedly the storyline is, nothing really special. It's your standard Pixar fare, standard post-Cars 2 Pixar fare, that is, where it's not bad, but it's not like on par with like Ratatouille or anything like that, but it's still, it's good for what it is. This movie is not on par with Pixar's Golden Age material, and honestly, it's not even on par with the post-Golden Age movies that I'd say are on par with their Golden Age material, but I still find it to be a really good movie regardless, and I also find it to be a massive step up from the two movies that Pixar released last year. Which is why I feel more sad about this movie doing badly at the box office than I do for Lightyear and Strange World. An important thing to remember is that Lightyear and Strange World both flopped for a multitude of reasons, one of them being that they were released alongside movies that would obviously be massive blockbusters in comparison. Lightyear was released around the same time as both Minions: The Rise of Gru and Thor: Love and Thunder, while Strange World would be released around the same time as Black Panther: Wakanda Forever and Avatar: The Way of Water. Strange World was released sandwiched in between an MCU movie and a sequel to the highest grossing movie of all time. It was doomed from the start. It had no chance of making a profit at the box office. I'm sorry. And you know what? All three of these movies, they're Disney movies, so that means there's a chance that Disney intentionally did this. They intentionally sabotaged any chances, any hope of Strange World doing successfully at the box office. How people still think that Disney cares about animation even after they pull a stunt like that is a mystery to me. I'm sorry. Elemental suffers the same thing as well, in addition to the severe competition from Across the Spider-Verse, which, honestly, yeah, that's not really surprising. Regardless of what would have happened with Elemental, if it was bad, if it was good, it could have been on par with their Golden Age material. It could have been on par with, like, The Incredibles or whatever, and it probably still wouldn't make as much money as Across the Spider-Verse. That was just an inevitable thing. I'm sorry. But then you also have The Flash. Now, I refuse to see The Flash for a lot of reasons, one of them being the numerous controversies with Ezra Miller, and also, less importantly, I've not watched the two Michael Keaton Batman movies, and to be quite honest with you, I'm sick of movies and TV shows relying on nostalgia and bringing back old characters from like previous versions of movies, because then it's like you have to watch those old movies in order to understand these characters' appearances. I shouldn't have to sit through 13 movies just so that I could understand Professor X's 5-minute cameo in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I will never get over that. I'm sorry. Over a year later, and that still pisses me off to no end. My initial fear was that The Flash would do successfully at the box office while Elemental flops, solely because The Flash is a superhero movie, which automatically makes tons and tons of money. Because according to society, superhero movies deserve more respect than animated movies. I don't understand it either. As it turns out though, both movies would end up flopping at the box office, which, I mean, yeah, it's good that The Flash did terrible, but it's not good for Elemental, obviously. Another thing as well is that the marketing for Elemental has been quite poor. I keep seeing videos and stuff of people talking about how they focus on this one background character that only appears for like a few minutes in the movie, and he has like no importance at all to the film. Like the official Twitter account for the movie posted like one of those like fake theater recordings or something that's like the audience's reaction to when this character first showed up, and it's obviously fake, and it just comes off as really desperate, you know? And it's a shame that like it's this movie, because I genuinely thought that this was a really good movie. So it's a shame that they do this kind of awful marketing. It's probably going to turn people away from wanting to see this movie. At this point, I've lost all hope for the Disney and Pixar, like their animated movies. I've just lost all hope with them. I genuinely do believe that in the near future, Disney is going to stop making animated movies, period. And who knows what's going to happen with Pixar as well. That they're probably going to like shut down or something. I have no idea. Because these last few movies, they've been doing terrible at the box office. If Wish does badly at the box office, that's the final nail in the coffin. It's over, you know? It's over. Just like that. And you know what? It is going to happen. Wish is going to do terrible at the box office. This is not me making a prediction. This is me stating an inevitable thing that is going to happen. Friendly reminder that Wish is coming out around the same time as The Marvels, the next MCU movie, which means, yeah, it's dead on arrival, just like that. Wish has no chance of being a box office success because it's coming out around the same time as The Marvels, and also it's coming out around the same time as Hunger Games 5. What happened with Strange World is going to happen with Wish as well. Both movies were released around Thanksgiving time, and they have to deal with competition from both an MCU movie and a highly anticipated sequel. And looking at the watercolor art style that Wish has, is showing that Disney might jump in on this trend of artistic animated movies that Spider-Verse pioneered, you know, after years of making safe, generic stuff and corporate manufactured live-action remakes. It shows that they might still have that passion for animation. They might still care about it after all, only for it to flop because it's coming out around the same time as a f***ing MCU movie. It's just, you know, like, it's insane, for real. That just further proves Disney's favoritism of, like, Star Wars and the MCU over their animated movies. Disney became famous because of their animated movies. They didn't become famous because of Star Wars or the MCU. I'm genuinely concerned that the next generation is going to view Disney as the studio that makes Star Wars and the MCU, and not the studio that makes animated movies. Like, that's genuinely a huge concern of mine. Elemental flopping at the box office is disappointing, but not all that surprising, honestly, and it just further shows Disney doesn't care about animation, and they intentionally make their animated movies flop at the box office so that Star Wars and the MCU and Avatar and the live action remakes and whatever can come in and rake in all of the money that the animated movie should have raked in but didn't. And it just bothers me, honestly. I genuinely have no idea how anyone can still think that Disney cares about animation and that they should still be included within, like, the animation conversation. If you can believe it, though, this is the less bad of the two things that I want to talk about in this video. So, yeah, let's move on to my next topic. This hurts me like you have no idea, for real. This was what made me reach my breaking point for this f***ing stupid art form. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a very important movie for me. I watched it when it first came out in late 2018 and I immediately fell in love with it. To say that I was excited for Across the Spider-Verse would be a massive understatement. This was by far my most anticipated movie of 2023, and I was so happy to see that, like, the wait for it was worth it at the end, you know? because this movie it's a beautiful masterpiece is what it is. This movie takes everything that made the first movie a masterpiece and it just made it 5,000 times better. I look at these two movies as like saviors of animation. I look at them as the antithesis, the polar opposite of the live action Disney remakes. You know, these are movies that actually have passion and care put into them. They're not soulless cash grabs like the live action Disney remakes. To find out that the animators that worked on this movie were severely overworked, it really hurt me, and it just changed the way that I view this movie. I know you could say, like, you know, it's not fair for me to say the movie is bad now because of this, but I don't care. I'm not able to enjoy this movie as much knowing that the animators had to go through all kinds of overworking and whatnot, crunch, just so that this movie could be finished. You know, I champion these movies as being better than any movie in the MCU. It turns out it's no different from the MCU. Just, oh my god, you know? And the sad thing is, this doesn't even surprise me all that much either. I'm not that surprised about Across the Spider-Verse having like really awful developments like crunch and whatever. This is, to my knowledge, the longest animated movie ever made, or at least the longest one from a major animation studio. There's probably like some weird obscure indie movie that's longer than this, but to my knowledge this is the longest major animated movie from like a major animation studio. It's also very bold and ambitious with its art direction, more so than the first movie. And even with the numerous delays of the movie, and even with the almost 5-year gap between the first movie's release and this movie's release, it was still just... oh my god, you know, like, this actually bothers me to no f***ing end. I know that this is for Across the Spider-Verse and not Into the Spider-Verse, but now this has me thinking maybe this sort of thing has happened with the first movie as well. It's entirely possible. Even if the second movie is significantly more bold and ambitious than the first movie when it comes to its art direction, that doesn't mean that the first movie isn't bold or ambitious. There was no other movie like Into the Spider-Verse when it came out. Nowadays, there are tons of movies, you know, Puss in Boots, Mutant Mayhem, stuff like that. Back then, Into the Spider-Verse was the first of its kind. There was no other animated movie like Into the Spider-Verse in terms of its art style and animation. So it genuinely wouldn't surprise me if the animators for the first movie had to be overworked as well, in addition to the second movie. I've seen people say that they should delay Beyond the Spider-Verse from its March 2024 release date. Apparently, like, almost no progress on Beyond the Spider-Verse has been done, and so people are saying like they have to delay it from its March 2024 release date. There's no way it'll come out during that time. And yeah, I want them to delay the movie, but I don't even know. I don't even feel that excited for Beyond the Spider-Verse now because of this news. I kept championing this movie as being, you know, like the savior of animation and whatnot, you know. This came out around the same time as Little Mermaid 2023, and let me tell you, these two movies, the differences between these movies is night and day, you know. You have a soulless corporate product versus a movie that actually has heart and passion and care and whatnot put into it. It's like yin and yang, you know? Polar opposite movies. I really wanted to see Across the Spider-Verse make more money than the Little Mermaid remake at the box office. I wanted to see it surpass it at the box office. And when that day finally arrived, when I saw that it had made more money, I was so unbelievably happy. Just to find out about this, it's like, it breaks my f***ing heart, you know? I championed this as being like, you know, the polar opposite of Little Mermaid 2023, and it's like, it's no better. At the end of the day, it's no better. Let me tell y'all a story. The night before I watched Across the Spider-Verse in theaters, I rewatched Into the Spider-Verse just, you know, to jog my memory. This was my 6th or so rewatching of Into the Spider-Verse, and I don't know what it was, but something about this specific rewatching just hit very differently for me. This rewatching made me feel very nostalgic for late 2018, early 2019, you know? Watching the movie, I just thought about how I was during that time when this movie first came out. I just thought about how much better I felt, how happier I was during that time. My mental health was significantly better during that time compared to how it is nowadays, and I just felt more happy. And this nostalgia that I got, like, from rewatching the movie, it just made all of the emotional scenes hit harder than they already did. You know, like watching Stanley's cameo, knowing that this movie came out shortly after he died, as well as Uncle Aaron's death, it's like those hit even harder because of the nostalgia that I felt for when this movie had first come out. What doesn't help as well is that this year Into the Spider-Verse turns 5. In December of 2023, it will officially be half a decade since the release of what is easily the most important animated movie in recent times. I plan on making a video talking about like why Into the Spider-Verse is important to me, you know, and how it makes me think of, you know, late 2018 when I was happier, and that video has to be scrapped now because of this recent news. I know that this news is for Across the Spider-Verse and not Into the Spider-Verse, but I don't care. It still counts. I'm just heartbroken, you know, like this, it just goes to show we can't have nice things no matter what, you know? There are so many terrible things that have come out of animation in 2023. The one time something good comes out of animation in this godforsaken year, immediately it turns out, oh no, something bad happened to it. It's just wonderful, you know? I don't care about animation anymore. I don't know why we should still care about this f***ing dead art form. Guillermo del Toro, whatever the f*** his name is, he was wrong. Animation is not art. Animation is not cinema. It doesn't matter anymore. None of this does. A couple nerds spamming animation is cinema all over the internet isn't going to convince people. It isn't going to convince the general public or the film industry that animation actually is a legitimate art form that should be taken seriously. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. The general public doesn't care about animation, so I don't see why we should still care about it, you know? Superhero movies, that's what matters more. That's clearly what matters. MCU, DCEU, that's clearly more important than f***ing animation, you know? Disney doesn't need animation anymore. I don't know why we should, you know? Animation's literally the thing that made them famous, and they're just gonna throw it away into the trash, ignore it, neglect it in favor of Star Wars and the MCU, because that's what rakes in all the money, you know? Movies that they actually made doesn't matter to them. What matters to them are 2 movie franchises that they didn't even create and are also long past their prime. That's what matters to Disney. You think Disney cared when Strange World flopped? You think they were sad about it? No, because Avatar 2 came out shortly after, 3rd highest grossing movie of all time. It doesn't matter. Strange World flopping didn't matter to them at all, because shortly after they would release the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time. Why should they care if their animated movies flop? Why should they care about the animators and whatnot that actually put time and effort into these movies? Why do they even bother, honestly? Imagine being an animator working at Disney and you put a lot of time and effort and passion into your movie and it ends up flopping at the box office just because it's not Star Wars or the MCU or a live action remake. God, you know, I have so much sympathy for like the animators at Disney. I feel so bad for them, like you have no idea. The fact that Marvel movies aren't real cinema is a more controversial statement than animation is only for kids. Just goes to show how f***ing stupid society has become. An entire art form gets dismissed as being only for kids throughout its entire history and nobody cares. But no, some guy says he doesn't like a random movie franchise and all of a sudden it's the end of the world. Y'all have your priorities set in the wrong places, I swear to God. I don't care about animation anymore. I don't care about this dead art form. I don't know why animation just won't die already. Why do we still care about animation? Animation is not art. Animation is not even a genre. Animation is a joke. The fact that the highest grossing animated movie of all time is not a beautiful artistic masterpiece like Spider-Verse or anything like that, but it's instead a soulless live action remake of an old movie that only exists and only made the money that it made because, say it with me lads, nostalgia sells. It just goes to show. Alright? If this doesn't convince people that animation is a joke, then I don't know what will. I want to get off this sinking ship, just abandon ship with animation. It doesn't matter anymore. Maybe David what's-his-face, the Warner Bros. Guy, maybe he has a point all along. Yeah, I'm gonna go there. I don't even care. I have nothing left to lose. Maybe my guy is actually doing the right thing. Maybe he's contributing to the death of animation because animation is beyond saving at this point. There has never been a lower time in animation history. There have been too many awful things that have come out of animation in 2023. The one time something good comes out of animation this year, it ends up being part of the problem. I'm done. Animation. It's not a legitimate art form. Never was, never will. Yeah, I wish I could go back in time and convince Walt Disney to become like a chef or something. I might try and convince him to not pursue a career in animation. Just become like a chef or something, Maybe like a football player. Play like a sport or something, Anything but an animator. I'm just tired and I feel defeated right now. I'm sorry for going off on this long tangent, but it just needed to be said. I'm tired of animation. I'm tired of just everything. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.